Welcome, students. Today we're going to look at conflict within a story, novel, or movie. Quite often you're asked to find the major conflict and identify its type. Hopefully this will help you figure out how to do that and correctly do so. First, we need to start with a definition of what conflict is. Conflict, quite simply, is a problem or a struggle a character deals with. Now, there's many different types of conflict that a character in a story or movie can deal with. In this video, we're going to focus on the main four that we see. The first of those being person versus person. So person versus person conflict, you normally have a protagonist in the story, and a different person or an antagonist might be working against them or causing problems or conflicts for them. So sometimes it's called the good guy versus the bad guy, protagonist versus antagonist, person versus person. So this might be two students that don't get along in a classroom. This could be a brother and sister that butt heads at home. This could be a girl that has a problem with her mom. All of those are different types of person versus person conflicts. Another type that's very common is person versus self. Now you see my little guy here, and he's kind of thinking through different things. He could be mad, he could be thinking, oh, I'm a failure, I have so much stress, and those things could be causing him some internal or person versus self conflicts. So a lot of times, a character might be faced with a choice between right and wrong. Do I choose to do this, or do I do this? Other times, they might be dealing with different emotions that they're feeling and how to handle those emotions. And sometimes it's a choice between what do I do. So some common examples of person versus self conflict might be deciding, do I do my homework when I get home from school, or do I binge watch something on Netflix? If I don't do my homework, that could cause other problems with my teacher or my parents, but that internal conflict of choosing to do the right thing and do my homework or choosing to procrastinate and do it later is a person versus self conflict. Another type of conflict that we have is person versus nature. So my pictures here, I have a little tornado guy and a shark. In person versus nature conflicts, I have different natural disasters that might cause problems for my characters. A tornado might tear down my house or cause some damage, or I could have different animals that are trying to kill me, attack me. Most times, this person versus nature conflict leads to, can I survive? Can I survive the shark attack? Can I survive the hurricane? Can I survive this bear? Those are all very common in person versus nature conflicts. Now, the final type of conflict that we're going to look at in this video is person versus society. Now here I still have a main person, but their problem has to be with a group of people or society in general. So I could have a specific subset or group of people, possibly the Ku Klux Klan. It could be a religious group that I'm having a problem or conflict with. Sometimes the character or I might be fighting against an injustice. Racism. I could be fighting for a specific cause. Okay, those are all things that would fall into that person versus society conflict. So all four of the conflicts that we just talked about can be categorized as being either internal or being external. Now, the external conflicts happen outside of our body. They're things outside of our control or external. So if we have problems with other people, that's outside our control. Nature is outside of our control. And people in society or subgroups are outside of our control. So those things all fall into that external category. Now, the internal are your person versus self. They're things that are within our brains, our emotions, our thoughts, things that we have a little bit more control over. So by this point, you might be wondering, why is conflict important to the story? Why does it matter to me? Why should I care? So there's a couple reasons why we really need to know what the conflict or major conflict is of the story. First, the conflict is what drives the plot of the story. the problems that the character deals with, really carries the action forward. Second, it's what the characters struggle with. If the characters didn't struggle with anything, the story would be pretty boring. And finally, it's what most stories have more than one conflict. Most people have more than one problem. Different things come up during the day or during the course of an event that people have to troubleshoot and figure out how to deal with. So now, knowing that there might be more than one conflict in a story, you might be wondering, how do I find the major conflict of a story? Well, there's a couple different things that you can do. First, you want to make a list of all the conflicts in the story. Go through and think, what are all the different problems that a character is dealing with? Once you have that complete list, you're going to ask the question, which conflict does the story revolve around? Which conflict moves the plot forward? And finally, once you have that figured out, you can decide what type of conflict the major conflict is. Is it person versus person versus self, and so on. Those 3 steps will really help you figure out what the major conflict of a story is. So just in case any of those steps are confusing, let's try to figure out conflict of a story together. Let's take the story of Cinderella. Hopefully you know that story. Cinderella lives with her wicked stepmother and stepsisters, wants to go to the ball, where she meets Prince Charming, but a bunch of problems ensue. So when I stop and think about that story, there's a couple different problems that I think of for Cinderella. First, she struggles to get along with her stepsisters. They make her do stuff. She doesn't like it, but she has to because that's her job. Another thing that she struggles with is she struggles to do all of the different tasks asked for her. Because her stepmother and stepsisters keep asking her to do things, it's a lot to get done. Another problem that she has is that she wants to go to the ball, but can't. Her stepmother won't let her. And finally, she can't really ever seem to please her stepmother. So as I think about those different conflicts, I have to ask myself, which of those conflicts does the entire story deal with? Which one of those conflicts really helps to move the plot forward and goes through the whole story? And I think the answer to that question is that she wants to go to the ball but can't. Now, who gets in the way of her being able to go to the ball? In reality, it's really her stepmother. So when I figure out what type of conflict, that's going to be person versus person. She wants to go to the ball, but her stepmother won't let her and gets in her way. So we've covered quite a bit together in this short time. So let's just do a quick review of the things that we learned so that you can remember the next time you're asked to find conflict. Remember, conflict is a problem or a struggle that the character deals with. There were 4 main types of conflict that could be divided up between internal and external. Our internal conflict is person versus self, while our external conflicts are person versus person versus nature, and person versus society. And finally, finding the major conflict. Remember, it's important because it drives the plot of the story and moves that story forward. It's what keeps it going. And the steps involved in doing that is first I need to make a list of all the different problems in the story. Once I have that list, I can ask, which problem does the whole story revolve around? And once I've figured that out, I can then decide what type of conflict is that problem, person versus person, and so on. Hopefully those steps and those things will help you in determining the major conflict of a story or movie.